Hi there, it's Unicorn, and today I'm going to talk about the two books that I read recently, and they are both longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. I try to read the long list of Women's Prize for Fiction every year, but then I failed every year. But I still think it's worth trying because Women's Prize for Fiction is one of my favorite book prizes out there. And the two books that I'm going to talk about today is The Lost Children Archive by Valeria Luzzilli and also The Milkman by Anna Burns. I think these two books have some similarity. For example, they both don't have names for their characters, although in the Lost Children Archive, they have nicknames for the children. And also they try to pack a lot of information together as a whole, but they do it so differently and it shows from the result. So let's talk about The Lost Children Archive first. The Lost Children Archive is a fictional documentation of a road trip that a family of four took together. They wanted to drive from New York City to Arizona, and they also in the middle of falling apart. The couple of the family were documentists and journalists. They tried to record soundscape for the city as a big project. So they carried this habit of recording on their road trip and recorded some of their trip. The story played around the word lost. A lot of the things in the story were lost. For example, the woman was lost in her marriage and also partially lost in her career. The children in the family was also lost in this situation because they don't know how to do with the falling apart of their parents. And the topics that the couple was interested in, for example, children refugees and Indian people in America, are also getting lost. And because the book tried to address all the topics together, neither of the topics were discussed completely. Although we have the setting of this one road trip together, you still feel the story was not a whole in many angles. The first part of the novel drew big attention to the couple's jobs, particularly the woman's volunteer job as an interpreter for children refugees who crossed the southern border of America. As readers, we got all the information and the news about children refugees, and this was the part that I was most interested in. But to the point you wanted more information and you want this storyline to be more developed, it stopped and disappeared suddenly, like abandoned by the author. So this political crisis you feel like the author tried to discuss failed to get to the heart of the matter. And from the second part, the voices of the book suddenly switched to the son of the family, and you get to know his side of the story, his thought and his feelings towards this road trip. I was very surprised by this voice switching, and from that point on, I feel like it's totally different stories with different focus and different theme. However, it shares the same style of storytelling as the first part of the book, so this gives the 10-year-old boy a very mature and unrealistic sound of tone in his voice to a point that I think is unbelievable. I still recall that I was wondering how a 10-year-old boy with his 5-year-old sister can do and say such things, especially given that they are in such a terrible condition. However, I think his part is more complete compared to the first part of the novel, but I still couldn't believe his story because he just sounds so mature. But I actually see great potential in this boy's story about how a toddler tried to get used to the adult world. However, it is not polished as I want it to be, and I think it is such a shame that his story was not developed because the book tried to focus on so many other things. So you may notice that I discussed the two parts as they are totally different stories because this is how I felt when I was reading the book. Despite they are sharing the same characters, they feel like two different stories for me. After I read this book, I watched a short interview of the author where she stated that she was trying to stuff in the book and also ask unsolved questions. For example, questions about the political documenting, how and where we should stand when we try to document the political crisis. Well, I then realized the author tried to stuff the book, but I still cannot figure out why, because it didn't go anywhere with all the things it stuffed. It even didn't get you to questioning why the things are stuffed in this way, not to mention the unsolvable questions that the author trying to ask. And it is also after I read this book, I realized the author actually wrote a nonfiction that I wanted to read for a long time. It's called Tell Me How It Ends. It's talking about the questions that the children refugees got to ask when they are facing deportation in America. And I think with all the experience the author have, she could develop the plot much more and make it more rich for people to read instead of using a storytelling method which only brushed over the issues that she wanted to address. So after reading this book, I actually think about it for a long time, but until today, I still think it should be divided into two totally different books and give more room to each topic to develop. So that's my thought on The Lost Children Archive. And now let's talk about Milkman by Anna Burns. Like I said before, this book also trying to pack a lot of information together, and I think it did a much better job. This book was talking from the perspective of a teenage girl who's called Middle Sister. This is, of course, not her real name, but we will discuss this later. And one day, Middle Sister found she was stalked by a milkman who wasn't deliver milks and who's already married. While she's considering this encounter as sexual assault, the rumor of her having an affair of this milkman was already spreading around in her community. And the rumor affected her life in many ways and even affected the way that she was thinking about day-to-day things. With the problems with the milkman going on, she also talks about a lot of things in her day-to-day life. For example, her relationship with her mother and her relationship with her boyfriend, or maybe boyfriend as the girl called him. Another huge thing that going on in this story was the political issues that her community was facing, where everybody was being watched and being judged by everybody else. And sometimes it's because of your political standing, and sometimes it's just purely because of your behavior and your lookings and etc. What I really love about all these information packed together is that you can really tell how the thinking of the whole community was affected by the political issues, and also people's behavior and people's judgment for each other was also affected. However, this is not a book that focused heavily on political issues. Its existence was only to explain some phenomena in their community and also support some of the conflicts that the character had, which in my opinion, making different topics supporting each other is a very clever way to glue every topic that you want to discuss together. I particularly loved a part when it discussed how people cannot escape from views. It's not only the views that people had on you, but also you cannot escape from the view that you yourself will formed, and also your views will always influenced by your surroundings. But it also addressed that the way you tolerate and express views could be different. The author discussed this issue with a side character who was very side. But to me, this was another smart thing of the author, that not many paragraphs in this book was wasted and they all serve their purpose. Another thing that caught my attention was the mother and daughter relationships in the book. Maybe it's my preference, but I always notice the mother and daughter relationship. In this book, the mother and daughter stands for totally opposite opinions and totally different eras, and their gap was filled with the misunderstanding of their point of views and also the sacrifices that they made each other over the years. But I liked it because although you got the point of view was from the daughter and you can feel her resentment of her mother, but you can still feel the inclusiveness of their relationship and also the complexity of the whole situation. One other thing that I remembered clearly was a part when the protagonist described a movie that she saw as a child. In that movie, there was a dog being killed for some reasons, but in her interpreter of the incident, the dog was killed because it's the only spirit that loves everybody in the town, and the dog was killed because it loves everybody. And this was shock to me because it's unexpected from the book. It's not something that totally new idea of the world, but I just didn't expect this, and it really made me stop and think about the people that we can hurt the most is the people who cared more. And as I mentioned before, this book doesn't have names for its characters. Everybody was represented by the relationship with the middle sister, who is the protagonist. For example, my third brother-in-law or my first brother's ex-girlfriend. Well, I can tell it may cause troubles for some readers, but for me, I feel like it's very unique and interesting. And same with people, the places and also the two sides of their political issues doesn't have a name either. All of those created a very mysterious atmosphere, and also you got to know that there was a war going on. I think with all the unnamed things and people, instead of getting lost, you got a emphasis on how cruel the environment was. With that being said, the book also has some places which may be a little bit more confusing. First of all, it's written in huge chunks, like unbreakable huge chunks, but within the chunks you got time jumps. So sometimes I think it can get confusing in that way, but to me it was still bearable. But I think it's something that to be aware of. I think compared to the Lost Children archive, this book answered my question of how to wrap everything together in one novel, and it did it really well. I know that it won the Man Booker Prize last year, and without reading all the shortlist from the Booker last year, I can tell why this book won. And that's all I had for the review of the two books. I'm kind of glad that I read them side by side so that I can compare them together, and I hope you find this review helpful. If you have any thoughts about the books that I mentioned, please leave a comment in the comment section down below. And I will continue reading the long list of women's press for fiction, but I cannot guarantee that I will read them all, given that I failed every year before. But I will still try, and that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video and happy reading. I will see you in my next video. Bye!